Please welcome the Chief Innovation Officer. And Pierre has a presentation. I don't know anything about the presentation, and it's it's Gaia-X Version X. So you know, then you would be version 3. So as a true innovation officer, I think if you interpret the X at least at 10. I don't know, you are living at around 2050 now. We are very I am poised to see what you have been able to come up with. Pierre, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Indeed, as a disclaimer, I'm just going to present the same thing that has been discussed today for the last 2 days, but with my point of view. Point of view of someone who has been doing with data space for like 4 years, who've joined Gaia-X and had no idea what is a data space, went through different versions of that, and will be my take of the trend, of the question I'm receiving, of the concern I'm hearing about, and how I see those data spaces evolving. So if you can go to the first slide. I have a clicker. Yes. And that's my first and only slide. And the reason is that I'm more here for a bit of a narrative of where we started, where I've seen we started, and where we are going. So those are bubble of soap. Bubble of soap, and I would like to imagine that every bubbles there on the far left, it's a data space. And right now, when I'm hearing people talking about data spaces, it's my data. Lord of the Ring, Gollum with the ring, my precious data. And they don't want to share the data, not because they don't want to make business, but because they are afraid of risks that are associated with either consuming or receiving data. Is the data going to be used according to my rules? If I'm using data to train the services, to train an AI model, was the data collected correctly? Do I have the consent of everyone collecting the data, and so on? So right now, I will say that we are in that area of data spaces. The additional complexity is that we have different definitions of data spaces. Even today, we've heard about B2B, business-to-business data spaces only. Then we have, in different countries around the world, we have B2G. They are interested to have business to government, for procurement. Then we have C2G, when the citizen directly work with the government. We have a very nice initiative. There are different, very nice initiatives in India for public public infrastructure. And when we think about India, when they have a data space, that's 1.5 billion participants in their data space. It's huge. They need to have something that scales. And they are very concerned about their privacy rights. They have an equivalence of the GDPR, which is called DPDP. Like many other countries around the world, they have now Data Protection Act. So for India, and as we move toward that path, the bubble starts to grow because the boundary of I don't want to share my data because of the pressure, they start to exchange. Each of those bubbles will be a data space, and each of those bubbles we have something that we've called a data space governance authority. It's not necessarily an organization, it can be a role, it can be different parties, can be a role from different organizations. And those bubbles start to associate, to aggregate themselves when you have a mutual recognition from two different data space authorities that says, hey, you've done your onboarding in the data space A, you get your credential as a member from the data space A, I will recognize that this onboarding in the data space A is also valid for my data space. And that will be the interoperability at the governance level, at the control level. When we talk about interoperability, to break down those barriers, you could, I really like, and that's something that's been done several times, to consider the 4 layers of interoperability from either the European Commission Interoperability Framework or from the ISO specification that are breaking down as follows: the legal, organizational, semantic, and technical. Legal is, for example, coming back to India or Singapore or Brazil or any of the US states that have Data Protection Act, is my Protection Act even compatible with your Data Protection Act? Otherwise, the alignment and the tug war that we can see and witness and hear about on the technical protocol layer, it's cute. But if at the higher layer you are not even allowed to share data, it's a good engineering fight, but it's not going to grow business that much. Then you have the organizational layer. Organizational layer will be like policy regulation. If you have, and that's something that starts to grow a bit, we are somewhere here. So we're still in the present. That was the past. I would say present is somewhere here. We have data spaces per vertical, per country. My vision is that we will start to have data spaces per vertical, cross-country. Right now, it's still per vertical, per country. Cybersecurity scheme. Each country in Europe have their own cybersecurity scheme. There is cybersecurity scheme. There is the willingness and the intent and the motivation to harmonize that with the EUCS. But so far, we still have France, Germany, Spain, Italy, each of them having their own cybersecurity scheme. The same thing with health, how to store health data. COVID learned that. The disease cross borders. The data doesn't yet. We are here. It grows. To break those barriers, one important point, and we'll say that's one of the we had in the board of Gaia-X, sharing a bit of the insight also, 12 priorities set by the board of directors for Gaia-X for next year. One of those priorities, that's compliance by design. And I will allow myself to add automated compliance by design. When you break those, back to the example I gave with 2 data space authorities that share common credential for the onboarding, that's what I meant. Interoperability at the governance level, policy level. To enable that, you need to have the interoperability at the 3rd layer I've mentioned, semantic. It was mentioned before. That's, for example, the role of the notary. You've been there maybe yesterday for the presentation of the notary, so I'll not explain again what is the notary and the role of the interoperability at the semantic layer. But you need that. And then you have the technical part, which is required. It's important, but the technical part, it's the mean to enable a business. If you start the data space by, I have great piece of technology, I will throw that together in a blender and start to figure out how it works. Yeah, it will work. You will do an MVP, you will do a POC, you will do a demo, you will do 1 or 2 prototypes, and then you will go to your legal department, and the legal department, hey, that's cute, but no. So, top down, legal, am I allowed? Organizational, what are the policy of my domain? Regulation, semantic, technical. And automated compliance is a way to break down those barriers. So my vision for the data space is that they will grow, and they will grow. More and more data space governance authority will align on those policies, will align also maybe by force or by design by the different domain on the technical protocol that are also there, the type of credential, the type of protocol to exchange the credential, the type of technology to ensure legally enforceable contract, and so on. And finally, well, I believe that that's the X. That's maybe 5 years, maybe a bit more, because as humans, we have a very hard time to consider exponential curve. We see things linearly, but it turns out that technology evolves exponentially. So when I think 10 years, I need, okay, exponential 10, okay, maybe it's then just 2. I still think that 2 is a bit too short. My vision is that these big bubbles here that I will consider as data space will even fade away. Few years, I think that we will consider the transaction of the data at the atomic level, that the compliance will be done at the time of the transaction, that the reconciliation of the credential, the proof, the evidence will be done real time, and that this notion of data spaces will be an artifact from the past. Hey, you remember when we had discussion about my data space not working with your data space? Yeah, data flows. Data doesn't flow on Rainbow, data flows on services. There is automated compliance. And that will be my, I will say, ending remarks for this presentation, which is a new type for me, because usually I have slides with a lot of architecture, diagrams, source code, and so on. I just asked ChatGPT to generate that for me. It was hard. I had to do prompting like 5 times to get what I wanted. So we are here, each one their own data spaces, with their own definition of a data spaces, saying that my data space is more precious than your data space and it's better than yours and so on. But the thing is that business, they don't really care about that. They care about, hey, how do I share more data to reduce my risk, to improve the quality of my services, to provide more services, and to do that, the alignment, and that's my strong belief, will be first, and that also something that I've witnessed from successful data spaces and data spaces that are less successful, alignment on the business business model. Then yes, I do think that as of today, when you are making your phone calls and you've traveled here, you don't even think, do I have a correct subscription with the local carrier? Just make a phone call and it works. And still you have the billing and the SIM card works and the protocol works. And I can tell you, it was a huge fight for telecom operator to align on frequency and modulation of the antenna and so on. Was worked out. Nowadays we have great services and people can happily charge us for that. Data spaces, that will be the same thing. We will focus on data transaction. We need data spaces because it's a great tool to explain where we are, where we want to go. But yeah, that will be my take on the Gaia-X Version X. So Gaia-X Version X, still working to enable data spaces, but make me a bit more focused to enable automated compliance, because there are today's different voices for what is a data space, and at the end, they all need onboarding. They all need to have some compliance, two types at least of compliance to repeat them. Regulated compliance or regulatory compliance from the body, from the states, from the regulations, and policy compliance that comes usually from the domain. They are struggling. They are paying huge amount of fees for audit, for review, for paperwork, and being able to relieve that burden from them is, I believe, a successful path to enable more data transaction without compromising on the security and the liability of those exchange of data. That will be my ending remarks. Thank you.